This is the surface planer, sometimes called the thickness planer, or just the planer. The purpose of the surface planer is to clean the faces of the board off. We don't do the edges like this. Now there are sometimes where we can, but typically we're going to be planing the faces of the board, top or bottom face. Okay? The way the machine works, and it's important to understand this, because it helps you be more safe when you're using the machine. In the front, if I were to open this lid, in the front you'd see an in-feed roller that's pulling the board into the machine. Behind it, about in the center here, is the cutter head, and it's turning towards you. And as the board goes in, that cutter head is shaving off the top surface of your board, the one that's facing up. And then behind that, a little further back, is the outfeed roller, and it is turning away from you, pulling your board on through the outfeed side of the table. So the infeed side and the outfeed side back here. So the distance between the infeed and the outfeed roller is important to know. Do you have any ideas why it would be important to know?
So your board doesn't get stuck.
Say it loud so we can hear you.
So your board doesn't get stuck.
So your board doesn't get stuck. That's exactly right. Because if your board is shorter than the distance from the front infeed roller to the back infeed roller, it is then going to be stuck right underneath the cutter head. And if that's the case, the board can't get pulled out, and it can actually get jammed up into the cutter and cause some damage to the machine and whatnot. So you got to be careful of that. And that distance is 10 inches. So a 10-inch board is the shortest board you can run through here independently by itself. Okay, 10 inches are minimum length. Now, if you had a board that was, say, 8 inches long, our best option is to plan ahead and cut a board long enough to get 2 or 3 pieces. Join it over here first, plane it first, then we can go ahead and cut them to the shorter pieces. That way they'll go through the machines properly. However, if you do have an 8-inch piece, you can get a second piece that is at least 10 inches long. We call it a backer board or a push board. That backer board has got to be at least 10 inches long. If it's not 10 inches long, as it goes through pushing your shorter 8-inch board, then it would get stuck if it's not 10 inches long. It also must be the same thickness as the piece you were trying to plane. Okay? A 6-inch board, even with a backer board, doesn't plane well trying to go through. So with a backer board you can do, I've done 7-inch and that's getting kind of iffy. 8-inch, 9-inch, you can do with the backer board very well, as long as that backer board is a minimum of 10 inches long. Now, when we feed our boards into the planer, we want to set them in at a slight angle instead of straight in. Not that they won't go straight in. If you put it straight in, it probably will. But what happens going straight in is sometimes they hit the rollers and whatnot, and then they don't feed in as smoothly. Just a slight angle, they just catch a little bit of the board and they seem to slide through the planer smoother and better. Not a great big angle like this, that's a problem like this, because it can turn your board clear sideways. So remember, just a slight angle. Also remember, on the planer, we are always planing with the grain in this direction. We wouldn't bring our board this way and try to run it across the grain. This particular one, for one, isn't long enough. And 2, as the cutter head's hitting across the grain, it's going to tear the grain and it won't be smooth. You'll get little tear outs all along the back edge. So make sure you're planing with the direction of the grain. Your hand should not extend beyond the front of this table. And by that I mean when you're holding your board, don't have your hands up here or underneath the board here as you're feeding it. If it's underneath, when the board gets in there, the roller grabs it, it's going to pinch your fingers in there, and you'll be trying to get your hand out of there before you get pulled into the machine. So make sure that your hands do not go beyond the front of this table. It's also not a good idea to get down and look into the planer while it's running. Why not? Yeah, we have a potential of wood chips, chunks of wood, whatever, coming out of the machine this direction. So you don't want to be looking into it because you don't want something possibly striking you in the face. When you're running it, instead of standing directly behind the board, stand a little to the side, so that if for some reason the board was dislodged in there and it came flying out of the machine, which it would come this direction if it's going to, it doesn't strike you, it just comes out and hits the floor and it goes out. So get in the habit of standing to either side, whichever one you want, instead of directly behind it. Okay, now we've got to get to the adjustment part of this machine. We need to know something about our board before we can set the machine properly. What do we need to know about our board? We've got to know the length. And in order to set the table height properly, what do we need to know? This is a hint right here. Thickness of our board. We've got to know how thick that is. Most of our lumber comes at 15/16 of an inch thick. So if you were to take your tape measure and measure all your boards, you're going to find that the thickest point is 15/16. Now you do have to be careful that you measure at the thickest point of your board. So sometimes the boards have a thinner part where it slopes off the edge, and if you're measuring right there, you're not getting the thickest measurement. So make sure you're measuring the thickest part of the board. So once we've determined the thickness, we can then plane the material and get to the proper thickness that we want. So 15/16 is how thick this board is. I can take 1/16 of an inch off each pass through the plane. That's the maximum amount. It's 1/16 of an inch. Okay? So, knowing this is 15/16 thick, and I can take 1/16 off from it in a pass through the planer, what am I going to set the planer to now for my first pass?
Number 1.
Cole, what do you think? Number 1? What do you mean number 1?
Press number 1.
These guys think they've got it figured out, huh? What does number 1 mean? You're saying number 1. What do you mean press number 1?
Number 1. That's it.
What's it gonna do?
It's gonna
Okay, what he's trying to explain is by pushing number 1,
change the.
it's gonna set the thickness or the bed of this for 7/8 of an inch. Because if you go 15/16 minus 1/16 equals 7/8. And so I have what are called preset settings right here. You'll see there's 1, 0 actually, all the way through 9. And when I hit number 1, you'll notice that this top window right here is going to change. Okay, right now it's set at 0.750, which is 3/4 of an inch. And you'll also notice that this is a decimal, not a fraction. So we need to be able to convert fractions to decimals. Anybody know how to do that? How do we convert a fraction to a decimal? Nobody knows? It's real easy. All you do is take the top number divided by the bottom number. What are those two called? The top number is the numerator, right? Divided by the denominator, which is the bottom number. That'll give you your decimal equivalent. Now I will get a chart on here that shows the decimal equivalents. I had one here and somebody got ripped off and destroyed, so I gotta make a new one. But it'll have the decimal equivalents for the main fractions you're gonna be using. So anyway, we're set at 3/4 right now. We want to get it to 7/8. So we're going to push number 1, and that changed our target window here to 0.875. Okay. Now we have to make sure the stop button is popped out when we're setting this, because if the stop button is in, it'll change the target number, but it won't actually set if the stop button is depressed. Okay. So we'll hit number 1 again. Notice the target still stayed at 0.875, and the start button is blinking here. I hit the start button now, and now these two numbers match. We know we're set at 7/8 of an inch. So the top number here is our target window. The next one here is our actual table setting. So these two match, we know that's the setting we're at. This one is always where the table is set. Okay? So if I hit number 2, notice that changed to 0.812, which is another 1/16 of an inch off. So that puts us at 13/16 now. If I hit number 3, notice that went to 3/4. And now we could set those to continue going down all the way down to 1/2 inch if we wanted to. But those first 3 are the ones we have set for presets. And of course I would hit the start button, and that takes me to that setting. Okay. There are 2 other ways we can set this. one of these two green buttons right here. Pushing this green button, it goes up, this one it goes down. But that makes it awfully hard to hit the machine, get it right where we want it. Plus you'll notice the numbers didn't change there, they should have changed. So we're gonna go number 1 and start. Get that to 7/8. So that's one way. The other way is our handle on the side. Make sure you can see this handle, everyone. It has a wheel with a handle that swings out. This can go in, and once it engages, we crank that, and it moves the table, and we can read it right here and tell on the scale what we're set for. So if our electric control panel here went out, we can still manually set it for thicknesses. The control panel is still the easiest way though. So let's go back to number, say 3, which that's where we're at. Let's go number 1, start, it's back to 7/8. Okay, so this is the one you're probably going to want to use. We can also program in a thickness here by hitting the yellow program button. We just push program. You'll notice the light's blinking in our target window now. Then I type in the thickness, so let's say I wanted to program 5/8 of an inch, which is 0.625. So I hit decimal, 625. Now my target window's in. We come down here to the bottom right corner where the enter key is and push enter.
What would the fraction be?
Then that started our start button blinking. Hit start, and that takes us to 5/8 of an inch. So that's the other way you can program it in for thicknesses. Okay? Alright, now it's back a little bit and we'll get the board ready to go through the machine here. There are a couple things I want you to be aware of. This right here is for adjusting a roller inside the table. I'm only going to adjust that if we have really rough sawn lumber that needs to go through the machine. So don't turn this, don't loosen it, just leave it be where it's at. It's set where we need it for all the boards we're going to be playing. Then over on the other side we have a speed lever over here where we can adjust the feed rate of our material into the planer. The machine must be running in order to adjust that. Don't try and crank it without it running. I leave it on the slowest setting because we run lots of different types of material through and it's plenty fast for what we do. Okay? So don't worry about adjusting that, but I do want you to be aware that that's what that is for. Okay, we need to set our planer to the thickness we need for this particular board, and we'll turn on the dust collector. I'll run one through, and then we'll be done with our demonstration. Then you guys will get to run your boards. All right, so we've got it set at 5/8. This board is how thick? Anyone recall what? 15/16 of an inch right now. I can take how much off in a single pass? 1/16. Therefore, I need to set it to 7/8. Hey, Barry listened at least, huh? Way to go. Okay, so number 1 takes me to 7/8 and start. I need to go over and turn that dust collector on. You want to get that for us? All right. Remember the blast gauge. We have to keep these closed when we're not using it. Make sure you open it when you're ready to use it, otherwise we get sawdust all over here. Turn the machine on here. And again, we're going to do this at a slight angle, and I'll stand to the side. Of course, we always wear our safety glasses. Slight angle. Alright, turn off that dust collector there. You can see that cleaned up the board, the face of the board. Now that reminded me as I was sending that through, there's one other thing I need to talk about. We talked about the shortest board we can run through here, but we haven't talked about what to do with really long boards. So if we had a 4-foot board or longer and the board's hanging out here quite a ways, the weight of the board, Mason, would you like to come up and do the demo? Okay, come up. Okay, then let's be quiet and listen. All right, so if it's hanging clear out here, you need to support the end of the board up level with the table. Otherwise, the front end of the board is being pushed up into the cutter head. And then same thing when it comes out the back. If it's not supported, it wants to push it up against up into the cutter head, and that creates a snipe, which means it's thinner on the end of the board because it got pushed up into the cutter head. Now, the narrowest this way we can run through here is really whatever can be stable in there. We can go clear down to a 1/2 inch thick, or a 1/2 inch width, I mean, and still run it through okay. That's not a problem. Now the thinnest this way we're ever going to try and plane down to, of course we'll be going at a 1/16 of an inch each time, but a 1/4 of an inch is the thinnest we're ever going to try and plane to. That way we don't run the risk of the table coming too close to the knives, contacting the table and creating a lot of damage.
Sparks.
So that's how the thicknesses, the widths, and the lengths are going to be handled. All right,